Therapy can be life-changing and help us finally let go of our past and live the life we deserve. But it's not always that simple. There are a lot of issues with therapy, things people don't want to talk about, but it's important that we are all informed so we can make the best decision for ourselves. If you're new here, my name is Kati Morton and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I talk about all things eating disorders, anxiety, depression, and really anything mental health related. So if you'd like to subscribe, we would love to have you. I promise you will always leave with some helpful information for you or for someone that you love. And subscribing really helps creators keep doing what we do. Okay, let's jump into this topic. The first thing I want to address is cost. Now, in order for therapy to be effective, we should be seeing a therapist every week, or at least every other week. I know a lot of you already, I know in other parts of the world too, they don't even offer it that often, but I'm just here to tell you that that's necessary because otherwise there isn't really any continuity in care and we won't even have the amount of time that we're going to need to go over what's happening now, as well as dig into things that happened to us in the past and what brought us into therapy in the first place. 50 minutes every, 3 weeks or 4 weeks just isn't going to be sufficient. And when therapy is $100 a session or even higher, in LA, when I left, it was around $200 to $225 an hour. That's going to make it inaccessible to most people because if we're supposed to do that every week or every other week, I'm no mathematician, but that's a lot of money, and that can be something that most of us can't afford. And so the cost of therapy, even though as a therapist I understand where it comes from, right? We have to rent a space. We often have to pay someone to do our billing or have a billing system that we run through. Maybe we have an assistant. We also have malpractice insurance. There are a lot of costs to becoming a therapist, not to mention educational costs. I finally paid off my student loans, praise Jesus, but it's expensive, right? And so while I understand it, I also understand that that makes it something that a lot of people can't afford. Therefore, a lot of people can't get the help that they need. And there are a few possible solutions for this. Number one is we can always ask a therapist if they work on what's called a sliding scale. Like when I was in college seeing a therapist, I saw someone at my school who was free through your school, so look into that. But when I got out, the therapist that I worked with after that didn't charge me her full amount. I think it was like $150 at the time. She only charged me $85. Now that was still a lot for me, but it was something that I could manage. And so it's okay to ask if they work on a sliding scale. Spoilers, all therapists do. Also, one of my first jobs out of graduate school was at a low cost or free clinic. The people that I saw paid me $20 an hour. Now, actually, I didn't even get paid because it was supervised hours and it was towards my licensure. But look for those clinics, ask around. Hospitals will know of them. You can also search them online. Just look for, family clinics or low-cost therapy clinics in my area. And if you're in a city, you're gonna have more access to that. But again, it's just something we can look up because you never know. Your small town might have one of those. The next problem with therapy is burnout. So many therapists are burned out right now, and I have many friends and colleagues who've taken a year or more off. My good friend Alexa, who you guys know, recently took a year off because of feeling burnt out. And I have a few, Alexa went back, but I have a few friends who just aren't going back to seeing patients ever. And I think the pandemic has really taken its toll on our caretakers because, obviously we talked about like the nurses and the doctors having to put themselves at risk and to work overtime and take care of all the sick people. But the therapists on the back end, right, we're the ones that are dealing with the trauma of it and the overwhelm and, kids going back to school, all of the things that are coming up for people. More and more people have been reaching out for help. And I forget the stat, but it was something like 3.6 million people weren't able to get the therapy that they wanted when they needed it in 2020. So we really have an issue with burnout, and it's really important for therapists or anybody in the caretaker industry to take care of yourself. That's why I always encourage people. I'm like, you need to make sure you're getting enough sleep. We need to have work-life balance. And trust me, I'm saying this to you as much as I'm saying it to me. But as a therapist, it's been really important and really helpful for me to be in my own therapy because I got to work out my own stuff, right? I don't want to bring that into my sessions, and I also don't want to feel triggered by people, right? I need to be able to manage my own shit. Overall, I just want to make mention of this because it's been affecting more and more of us, and it's something that we need to be aware of. Taking real breaks are important. We need to take vacations. That shouldn't be something that is looked down upon or something that's difficult to do. We need to prioritize it, and we need to prioritize that basic self-care, drinking enough water, eating regularly, getting enough sleep, and getting at least 2 days a week, you heard me, at least 2 days a week off from work. We're not robots, right? Another issue with therapy is access. And not only is this the financial component, which we already addressed, but this can also be location related. For those of you who don't know, I grew up in an incredibly small town. I didn't even realize how small until recently. But finding a therapist in that area is nearly impossible. I tried to help my mom find someone who could help her with her anxiety, and I could only come up with 2 possibilities. And guess what? Neither of them were seeing new patients. I know, shocker. And that's actually some of the silver lining with COVID because everyone is now offering online therapy. I know some are returning to in-person, and yes, I do want to acknowledge that even I personally prefer seeing my patients in my office. Video calls, it's just not quite the same. We kind of miss something there, but it's better than nothing. And the great news is that you can now see anyone within your state. And I know it's probably different wherever you live, but I know it's the same in Canada, and I'm sure in other countries they have similar, licensing restrictions. But this is amazing if we're looking for a specialist and we live in a small town like where I grew up, right? We could look to the bigger cities like Seattle, or maybe we could look to Dallas if you're in Texas. You can look at anyone within your state and they are legally able to see you. So it's really helpful to maybe look into things like BetterHelp or Talkspace. I always link BetterHelp down in my description. So if you're looking for that option, it's available to you, and it's a way to make this access issue maybe not such a big issue anymore. The next issue with therapy are limits to confidentiality, and I've heard from many of you that you're concerned about this. So let's talk them through. What I mean when I say limits to confidentiality is that when you see a therapist, if you're an adult, so if you're 18 or over, you hold the confidence, meaning everything that's said in therapy stays in therapy, and it's up to you who else gets to hear about it. Meaning that, like, if you're seeing me and you want me to talk to your psychiatrist or your regular doctor, you decide that. You sign what's called a release of authorization, giving me the authorization to talk to that person. So you hold it, you get to decide. And that's really important because we can share, deep, dark secrets in therapy, and it's nice to know that it's gonna stay there. However, there are limits to this. And a lot of you know of these, but I just want to talk you through some of those limitations so that you feel informed when you make the decision to go see someone. And one of those limitations is what's known as Tarasoff. Now, Tarasoff is named after this girl who was actually killed by a person who was in therapy, and they told their therapist that they were going to go harm her. Now, we call it like duty to warn now, but Tarasoff is part of the reason that I can actually break confidence to warn someone if I know that one of my patients has the means and is planning, is going to go harm someone. I can do something about it, because before that happened, we couldn't. And so if you're a danger to yourself or to someone else, I have within my legal rights as your therapist to break confidence. Now, I want you all to know that that's not something that therapists do like easily or take lightly. There are a lot of steps that we take. So especially when it's danger to self. I've dealt with a lot of patients over the years who struggle with suicidal thoughts. That doesn't mean I'm gonna all of a sudden call your parents or put you in the hospital, right, and break that confidence. I'm gonna talk with you. I'm gonna do check-ins. We're going to try to put in safety plans and see each other maybe more frequently to ensure that you are okay and you get through this tough time. However, if you tell me I'm going to go harm myself right after this session and you won't do a check-in and you won't tell me, like, sign a no harm agreement with me, I'm not going to have any other choice but then to take care of you, to make sure you're safe, to keep you from harming yourself. And the same goes for if we're a danger to others, right? If we're homicidal or wanting to go maybe kill the person who abused us, I have to tell people, because overall we just want to keep everybody safe. Now, there's also the fact that as a therapist, also teachers, and I'm sure I know other people like nurses and doctors and other people in the care industry, we are mandated reporters as well. So another limitation to confidentiality is that we have to report child abuse or dependent adult abuse, meaning even if I'm over 18, right, I'm not a child anymore, I am dependent on others for my well-being. This could be because I have a disability or I have some kind of physical illness or mental illness or something that makes me not able to care for myself. So if I'm a dependent adult or a child or an elder, anybody over 65, if someone is abusing me physically, sexually, emotionally, financially, I, as a therapist, if I hear about it and know it's either going on or it could be putting another child in harm's way, I am mandated to report that to, let's say it's child abuse, it'd be to Child Protective Services, or if it's an elder, it's Elder Protective Services. Either way, I'm going to have to break your confidence and report it. Now, I know I'm just rattling these off, and I don't want anybody to think that these things happen frequently or that they're things, again, that we take lightly, because we don't. But there are, limitations to protect people. Another limitation to that is a court order. So if you put your mental health on trial in any way, I could be ordered, meaning forced, to testify. And I would have to, answer their questions at the best of my ability. And that would, again, be a limitation to the confidentiality that we hold together. And the final, well, I guess there's also if we're under 18, but another thing is the Patriot Act. Now, I've never had this come to be, but it is something that I was taught in school that we're aware of. Because of things that happened on 9/11, we lost some of our rights to privacy. And so if someone comes in my office and is like, Patriot Act, and they give me this piece of paper, they can essentially take my records and I can't stop them. Now, again, this isn't something that I've ever heard happen to me or anybody I know, but it is one of those limitations that you should know about. And if you have any concerns about any of these, ask your therapist. You're supposed to have what's known as informed consent, meaning you understand these limitations, you understand what it means to be a patient with them, and you're okay moving forward. And it's perfectly normal for you to ask questions so that you understand what's going to be shared and what's not. And if you're under 18, your parents can be told things about your therapy sessions, although ethically they can't share everything, and they should talk to you before they tell your parents anything. That's always frustrated me when I've heard from many members of our community, and they're like, oh, they told my parents everything and I didn't even know. I think that's ethically wrong. I feel like it's really important for us to communicate with our patients about it before we go telling their parents things. When I was in school, my law and ethics professor, who I love, she always said, it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's what she said. The only things you would tell a parent would be if you think they're, in risky sexual behavior that could be dangerous, or if they're doing drugs or alcohol, again, things that can be dangerous. And rock and roll, she said, was if they're just engaging in risky behavior, and mainly safety concerns. But communicating that with you so that you know is really important. Couples counseling, all therapists have this rule that we're not the secret keepers. Meaning that if you call or email me something about the situation with your spouse, I'm not keeping that from your spouse. So I'm not going to go into session and not tell them that you told me. It all has to be out in the open. And that's frankly for the therapeutic benefit, because if we keep hiding things and keep secrets and we talk behind their back, that's not really healthy behavior when it comes to building and maybe healing a relationship. And so that's not really a limitation to confidentiality, but something that you should know, that your therapist, when you're in a group like that, like family or couples, the therapist is not the secret keeper. The final issue with therapy is that finding the right fit can be hard. I heard from a lot of you, you've seen a therapist 3, 4, 5 times, you're just not sure, and it can be an investment in time and money only to have to start over again with someone else because they just don't get us. Unfortunately, there's no easy fix for this, and we know through research that the relationship we have with our therapist helps determine the outcome, meaning that it's the relationship that's the most important, because we want to feel like they see us, they hear us, and they're rooting for us. And that's actually more important than what their license is or their specialty. And so I know finding that right fit can be hard, not only, time consuming, but also expensive. But stick with it. I encourage you to check out a therapist's website and ask a lot of questions up front, because therapists don't have a ton of money, and all the text that you read on their website is something usually they've created. So you can kind of get a feel for them. Usually they have a picture so you can see them, and just see if you can get a feel before you make that first appointment. And then trust your gut. If after 2, 3 sessions, maybe it's really hard to get to their office, maybe you don't feel comfortable. I know therapy is not the most comfortable experience, but we should feel kind of okay there and get more comfortable as time goes on. We shouldn't feel triggered. We shouldn't feel overwhelmed. We shouldn't feel like they're not listening or they forget important things or they fall asleep, or it needs to be, I feel like they're at least good and they're listening and I feel somewhat comfortable. This could work. We should feel that little spark. You know, when you meet somebody new in your life, you're like, I don't know what it is about them, but I just kind of like them. We should feel that for them. And so pay attention to your gut. Listen to those feelings that you have after those first couple of sessions so that we minimize the time and money put into it before realizing maybe it's not the best fit. Overall, just know that therapy is worth it. I know it's an investment in time and energy and money, but I can tell you even personally, it's been incredibly life-changing. And so I hope this helps you be more informed because there's a lot of things that people we don't know, right? How are we supposed to ask questions if we don't even know these are issues? So hopefully this helps you feel more educated and informed so you can make the best decision for you. But if there's things you thought I left out, leave it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye.